Hello, everyone, and welcome to ILA's first community webinar series where we'll hopefully help you all make your passions into a reality. Today's session is going to be about storytelling with data. We're going to have a survey at the end of the session so you can voice your opinions on what different topics you want to hear from us and what you thought of this session overall. There's also a question bottom that you can ask your questions at any time. However, we'll be responding to all the questions at the end of the session. So without further ado, we have Esra with us from Bank ABC. Esra is a data scientist, and she's going to be taking us through today's session.
Thank you, Ahmed, for the introduction. And I think ILA Bank is doing a very interesting and different initiative to help and serve the community. So today we are talking about data storytelling. And the main reason I suggested to start with this topic is that we see a lot of bad graphs, like really a lot of bad graphs, whether it is on daily basis, on newspapers, it's literally everywhere. So I thought to start with this talk where we can talk about how not to create bad charts and how to package your stories in a good way, where the audience can take the action that you want the audience to take. We'll talk also about the best practices for chart design and how basically to tell a story with data. Those are the high-level topics we'll go through. So we'll talk about why data storytelling, and then we'll do some chart makeovers, and why pie charts are evil, how to choose our charts, and then the psychology of colors. Now, to start with, when we talk about data visualization or data, charts in general, the center of attention is usually our audience. And if you think of it, regardless of who is doing the data visualization or why are they doing it, the main reason that we do data visualization is to tell a story. Now, sometimes the stories are hidden behind numbers, and that's what we'll talk about in terms of how to take out the story from behind the numbers and bring it to the forward to serve the audience. Now, to start with, the center of attention to all the data that we talk about is the audience. Basically, they will tell us, knowing the audience will help us answer a lot of questions, what data to use, what design choices to make, how much details do we have to put in there, who are the audience, and then what do actually the audience need to know. So, so the first point in starting any data visualization or data storytelling, I would say project, but it's not necessarily a project. It can be on our day-to-day work, or it can be just to put up a message. So the first, okay. So the first thing we start with is data. Now, of course, this is the most, the usual starting point, I would say, of data storytelling. But this is the least topic that I will cover on this talk. I'll focus more on the other techniques that are beyond the data. Now, okay, this the chart got a bit messed up, but in general, what we do is we start with audience. Knowing our audience would tell us what do we need to put on the data visualization or on the data chart, and then how much details do we have to put in there, and then all the other questions related to our data visual. Now, the second type, or the second focus that we have is the audience, is the visuals, right? On top of data, we have the visuals where we create our visuals. Now, we can think of visuals in many different ways, but then what charts we have to ask ourselves, what charts do we use? And do we need charts to start with? Now, we see a lot of pie charts being used, a lot of bar charts being used on many different occasions. But in many situations, if we talk in all honesty, some tables are not, some charts are not supposed to be used. And in many cases, actually, tables would make more sense. And then there are also some impact metrics. When used, they would outperform. Impact metrics do outperform data visuals in many cases. And impact metrics basically are when you blow up a number. So let's say you have 19% increase in your sales. You blow up the number, 19% increase of your sales, and that's it. You don't really need a chart. The third or the fourth and most important is the narrative. Now, what is the story behind your data, and why are you even starting with it? Usually we do work, let's say, on a set of data visuals to put up our story. Those data visuals need to have a consistent story that goes throughout. And then once we satisfy all those four different aspects of data storytelling, we end up with data storytelling. Now, again, just to wrap up on this part, audience is the key factor in here. Now, we can let's start with this interesting chart. Sorry. Okay. So over here, this is just illustrative data. I have issues received and issues resolved. Let's think of this as let's say a call center for a restaurant, for a big restaurant. Okay. Now, what is I think you can use the chat option. I'm not sure, Ahmed, if it's enabled.
Yeah, it should be enabled.
My question is, what's the key takeaway out of this chart? Okay, I can see more problems not solved. That's right. The difference between received and resolved, that's also right. Trend analysis, they're all correct questions and to the point. Ayman says months on which more problems are solved in comparison to other months. Okay, so you see, we have different background, we come from different backgrounds, and we have different point of views towards this chart. And this is a big, let's say, setback of not using data storytelling in a correct way. Now, let's remake this chart together, and then we'll see what was the main takeaway. Now, what I did with this data is that I changed it from bar charts to line charts. And the main reason is that for bar charts, you have to compare a lot of things together. But then for line charts, it's very easy to figure out what's the main issue. Now, over here, the main issue is that on May, we started having a big gap between issues received and resolved. Okay, so the first thing that we did is change to line chart, and then we changed the colors. And the main reason is that with the same color but different tones, it gets sometimes confusing when I say, oh, the dark blue is issues received, while the light blue is issues resolved. It gets confusing, and we can easily use red and orange or any other color that you would like. What I did here next is that I removed all the lines. They're unnecessary, the grid lines. And then I removed as well the border. Again, I cleaned the axis labels over here. And then I added the legends on each line chart. Okay, so we recleaned the chart again, and then the last thing that we did is we added actionable labels. Now, what were the actionable labels? We can actually even remove the month bar. And now it's very easy to figure out. Now, if I ask you what was the issue that this restaurant was facing, it's very obvious that in May, we have 3 drivers who left, and then the backlog started to increase. And I think the most important part of this is that we added the chart title rather than issues received versus issues resolved over time. Now we have an action that we need to take, we need our audience to take, which is please approve the replacement of 3 drivers who left in May. It's straight to the point. Now we can all know what is what was the cause of the issue, what was the issue and the impact of the issue, and what action do we need to take to resolve the issue. Now you see, if I go back, we moved from this to this, which is a huge difference in terms of portraying the issue or the data that we're trying to fix. Okay, now another chart makeover. This was a survey done after coding or before and after a coding class. The first question was, how do you feel about coding? And then the second question, which was after the class, how do you feel about coding again? Okay, so the question is, which had the biggest difference, pre and post? So we can see that the options that they had were bored, not great, okay, kind of interested, excited. Okay, answer. Okay, went to interested. Okay, so so when we had to compare the 2 charts, we had to go back. Okay, we had to go back and forth comparing the different segments of the pie chart, and then that causes a lot of thinking that the audience has to do, which they're not supposed to do, honestly, because if we put the data chart in a proper way, we basically take the effort that the audience has to do and put it on our side as on the data chart. Okay, so we saw that this has a lot of back and forth throughout, you know, when comparing the 2 results. So how can we make this chart better or more readable? Bar chart, nice. Okay, that's true. Now what we did is we combined both surveys before and after the coding class, and then we can see that the highest difference was on the okay, which was answered on the previous chart, but then it took a lot of thinking to answer that. And then we added a summary, let's say, of what were the key things that we want our audience to focus on. So before the program, majority just felt okay, and then after the program, more audience were interested and excited. And then again, focusing back on the action that we need our audience to take. So over here, it was the audience, let's say, okay, nice question, Hussein. I'll get back to you just a minute. So over here, the audience were, let's say, the coding school managers, and we were recommending to continue offering this program. The question, why is 1 bar in dark gray? Hussein asked this question. So mainly it's because to attract attention of the audience on this part specifically. We can do that. Basically, we're just increasing the tone of the color and not changing the color, but it can be done in different ways. We'll come in a bit to more of those examples. Okay, so we see a lot of ways where we can. We see a lot of visualizations, whether they're on dashboards, on newspapers, and pie charts are always there. It's like really always. So for the first 3 days, I was opening local newspapers just to see where do we have data on the newspapers and how is it portrayed, or what data charts they were using. And most probably it's a pie chart, or a bar chart and a pie chart. Okay, so pie chart, they are evil, specifically because they are deceiving. Okay, so let's take a few examples of the evils of pie chart, and then we can discuss do we still want to use it or not. Okay, so this is a survey, let's say, and then we have the answers ranging from strongly agree to strongly disagree, right? Now, if we don't have the percentages on there, it can get a bit confusing, right? But we can still, even with the percentages, we can clearly see that the percentage of people who answered disagree and agree and strongly agree in all of them. But then, wouldn't this look better? So when we turn a pie chart to a bar chart or a horizontal bar chart, and then start from strongly agree to strongly disagree, we know that strongly agree is one starting point, and then strongly disagree is the ending point of this questionnaire or survey. In general, ordered data are not supposed to go on a pie chart at all, because they're really confusing. So for this example, it's very easy to figure out which one, where the extremes are. But in other cases, it's not very easy to figure out. So whenever there are ordered data, for example, this case, we have, let's say, ages of different age groups, and then we have the age ranges. So the pie chart, or the pie chart does not give you is not really powerful when it comes to ordered data, and it's always suggested to avoid it. By the way, please feel free to add your questions on the Q&A, just in case I miss them on the chat, and then we'll have the last 10 minutes or so to answer questions, if any. And then going back to the evils of pie chart, patterns over time. Again, Q1 to Q4, we can do it, we can represent the data on this way, but then if we really need to compare in a proper way, this would be the best way to present the data, because you can compare Q2 with Q1 and then Q2 with Q3 instantly. But then on a pie chart, it's quite difficult to do that. You really have to go to do a lot of back and forth with your audience eyes to figure out what the word was. Okay, another evil of pie chart is having more than 3 categories. It gets really confusing to audience when you have more than 2 or more than 3 categories, I would say. If you have more than 3 categories, just avoid using the pie chart. You can see that it's much easier to read the horizontal bar graph versus the pie chart. And then the last, one more. When you have more than 1 pie chart, you really have to compare back and forth between the different companies, and then the gender of each company with the gender of the second company, and it goes on this. So over here, it's very easy to compare and point out which company has the least number of women, which company has the highest number of women, and so forth. Iman, I think you have a good question. Sorry, I'm answering this now. Okay, so you know how we usually, when we start with any data project, let's say, or any data presentation, what we usually do is, and even I used to do that, is just select the data, and then from Excel, I click suggested chart, and then I choose any one of them that looks nice. But this is the wrong way to do it. Now, in many cases, we do get it right, but in some cases, when we get it wrong, it would be a really harsh one. So it's better to think of the data and then think of what is the best way to portray this data, and then choose a chart rather than just selecting a random thing. So the horizontal bar, it's on Excel. And of course, Excel is not the only way to do data visualization. You have Power BI, you have Tableau. And then if you want to go to coding and open source, you can do R or Python. But Excel is powerful enough to do all of the things that we discussed. Okay, so I got you through a lot of pie chart evils. And now the rules of using pie charts, just make sure they're well formatted. No 3D, of course. No legends, because legends are confusing. And then basically what you have to do, the main thing that we have to focus on is to avoid the audience going back and forth to compare data on two charts or two segments of the chart. And then we can just use a chart that's very easy to read. Pie charts always have to add to 100%. Sometimes it does not add to 100%, and then it causes a lot of confusions. Pie charts cannot contain negative numbers. If they do contain negative numbers, it won't be understandable at all. Usually for pie charts, we use them when we want to display a single point in time rather than a set of or a series of times like the Q1 and Q2, Q3 series. Maximum, I would say, of 3 slices or 3 categories. And then pie charts are best when they are displayed individually, so one at a time rather than having 4 pie charts, for example, for the 4 companies that we just saw. Okay, so again, back to the main question is how to decide the type of the chart that we need to use. If we need to compare values, okay. So those are the questions that we can use to figure out or to understand and have the correct methodology of choosing the correct type of data chart. If we want to, do we want to compare? We have to ask ourselves those questions. Do we want to compare values? Do we want to show composition of data? For example, the device type used for a website. Do we want to understand the distribution of our data? Like the students' grades in a class, the ages, let's say, of your customers, and so on. Are you interested in analyzing trends in your data set? For example, sales over the past 3 years? And do you want to understand the relationships between 2 values? Now, those are all key questions that would help you choose the correct data visual for yourself. Okay, now we'll take a few examples that could help us in deciding the type of the chart to use. For this example, we're trying to figure out how many new users are we acquiring every day. Fine. So the goal is to compare values, which is number of users, and then over time, which is, let's say, days in this example. What type of chart would you use? So we can use, of course, not a pie chart. We can use a pie chart, a bar chart. We can use a line chart. We can use maybe a histogram. So let me know your thoughts on the chat option. Okay, yeah, correct. It's a line chart. And in this example, we have unique users and then over time, which were days in this case. We can easily compare the different number of unique users that were acquired on every single day. That's true, Salman. Okay, another question. How does the traffic from mobile and desktop differ? So again, going back to the 5 questions, we were comparing values in this for this question. We need to compare values. So to compare values, what is the best way to do it? Bar chart. Yes, that's true. So for this, we use the group bar chart, which is mainly a bar chart. And then we segregated the different categories. And then for each category, we have the number of desktop and the number of mobile. So you can easily compare the values, which were the number of sessions on desktop versus mobile on each category or on each referring point. Okay, I think we have 2 more questions maybe. What time of day sees the highest number of users on our website? So what are we comparing? We're comparing the number of sessions over hours and then across days. What do you think? Line chart. Okay, that's true, line chart. We have the number of sessions, and then we have the x-axis with hours, and then each of the lines represents one of the weekdays. So we can easily figure out that on weekends we have higher peaks on later days of later hours of the day. Again, which landing pages are driving the most engagement across our channels? So we are trying to look at the relationship between channels and landing pages. And then we will see how the different combinations impact the session duration. What do you think, chart? Okay, so this is one of the examples that I mentioned earlier, where tables, chart is basically a table with that is color coded. Tables are in many cases the most they would make more sense compared to other types of charts in many cases. Especially depending on your audience, but especially if your audience need to go into the details of let's say the sessions per engagement channel, or like any of the sessions that any of the data that we're looking at. If you need to go into minute details, tables are the best way to do it. And then using color coding, which is the heat chart, is the perfect way to show where the peaks are and where the lows are. And then we can easily figure out that this is the highest peak of session duration, and this is the lowest peak of the lowest of the session duration. Just in case if you wonder, the heat charts, they can be done on Excel. It's not it's very easily doable on Excel. But it's, again, on Excel, it's not a type of chart that Excel suggests. It's usually done more on a manual way. Okay, I think this is the last question. Where do we have opportunities to drive more traffic to high-performing web pages? For this question, we have to figure out the relationship between values and the pages. Okay. What do you think? Any suggestions on the charts that we can use? Okay, so on this case, scatter plot, that's true. Because we're looking at more than one angle of things, scatter plot is the best way to do it. If we have one more angle to look at, we can use the same scatter plot, and then the dots would okay. So if we have one more angle to look at of the data, so let's say the type of customer, we can either color code the points on the scatter plot, or we can use different sizes of the dots to represent the number of customers or any other point. Okay, so looking at all the previous questions, we come up to a single point of discussion, which is the pre-attentive processing. Pre-attentive processing is mainly basically when you look at something, or when you look at a graph. When you look at a graph, your mind pre-attentively processes some of the information or most of the information, and then you really don't stress on the audience to understand the chart, but rather their mind does it in a subconscious way. And a very, very good example of that are those numbers. Yeah. I'm not sure if you can still chat, but if you can, tell me how many trees are there on this chart or on this screen. Okay. Fine. So it took, okay. So we have answers 6, 5, 7, 6, 6. Okay. Fine. So how about now? Sorry, how about now? Can you count the number of trees? Still 6. Okay. How about now? Now we have 5. Now it's 6, yeah? Okay. So with those 3 screens, they had the same numbers. They had the same text, but it's easier to read the last one compared to the previous 2, because of just using the power of colors. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. It's just the power of colors. And the main thing, or the main thinking behind this, is that we use the brain's pre-attentive processing to process this, rather than the focus of the audience to process this. I was timing. It took around, on the first one, it took around 40 seconds to get 7 answers. And then on this screen, it took 20 seconds. And then on the screen, it was like quite obvious. So exactly, it's the magic of data science. So it's honestly, it's not, it's more of, it's really something that anyone can do. It's not a technical thing. It's just those tiny tricks that would make a huge difference in terms of the data visualization or the data story that we're trying to tell. Now, on this, with this example, we focus on the pre-attentive processing and the perceptions that the mind makes. Let's talk about that a little bit. So when you compare two different things, we usually compare them in length, size, colors, the angle it is shaped in, sometimes the density of the color. And those different ways of comparing two visuals, sometimes some of the comparisons help the mind to think less and just process it at the back of the mind. And then this is something that's really useful when you present your findings or your data analysis to anyone. Now, this is, it comes from a lot of research done by brain doctors, but the most accurate perceptions or the most accurate comparison that the mind does is with positions, and then it goes to length, and then it goes to angle and slope, and then to volume, and the least accurate is the color density. Okay, so if you think back of the first bar chart that we compared, it had both light blue and dark blue, and for this, it wasn't. If we had, let's say, if we had 4 different shades of blue, it's not easy to compare them. While with positions, it's very easy to compare. So this is, I think this is a key thing to keep in mind when building data stories. Just basically, we try to stay at the top of this chart or of this methodology, and always avoid going to comparing volumes and density unless you have consumed the top parts. So we start with comparing the positions, and then if we have one more angle to see the data from, we add length to it. If we have one more angle, we add slope to it, and then it goes on till we reach the color density. And this example, I think it's all the methodologies that, or the accuracy that's used here, is best seen on scatter plots. So many scatter plots, if you have 5 angles where you want to see the data from, you can actually consume all 5 perceptions within the same chart. So if you look at scatter plots, if you Google scatter plots with 5 dimensions, you'll see a lot of examples using all those 5. Okay, again, to perception and visuals, which is the biggest chunk in here. Let's see answers on the chat. They are equal? No. Hard to tell. Green, 3, 3, 4. Green, 3, yellow. Okay, nice. So see, over here, we use the perception. The perception that's used in this pie chart is the angle. And it's one of the, let's say, least accurate or less accurate perceptions that are used. If we change this to a bar chart, we can see that 4 is the highest. And in bar charts, the perception or the pre-attentive analysis that is done is position or length. Sorry, it's length. We can easily figure out that 4 is the highest. Yeah. Even though with the pie chart, we had a lot of contradicting answers, which is quite interesting. Okay, which is the 3rd tallest bar here? Yeah, now they're evil. Which is the 3rd tallest bar here? Okay, we have HB, HB. Okay, yes, it's H. But again, it took some focus from the audience to figure that out. While if we use the we can use color coding if H is, has a business understanding behind it. We can use color coding to attract attention to this specific bar. Okay, I have the answer here by mistake. So the value of A is how many times as large as the value of B. Over here, we're comparing areas, which is quite difficult to compare. You can see that A is definitely larger than B, but you can't really see how different are they. Yes, difficult without the grid lines. That's true. Okay. So since we talked about colors and all the numbers that we used here, it comes to an important thing. So when you see this, let's say table, which is better, competitor 1 or 2? So competitor product 1 or 2, which is better? One. Fine. Okay. So the answers so far are 1. Oh, now we have 2. Okay. So because of the background processing, let's say, of our minds, we tend to focus the positives on green and then the negatives on red, right? Because that's the most used color coding. But then in this example, because it's a competitor product, actually competitor product 1 is worse for me because the growth is higher, while competitor product 2, the growth is decreasing. So it's better for me as a company, let's say, or it's better for my product. But then here, the key takeaway is that negatives are not necessarily bad things. So not all negative is bad. And in many cases, red and green in general are used in, let's say, not very satisfying ways. In general, if you're not trying to have your audience take sides, avoid the use of green and red as colors on your charts, because red is usually associated with negatives and green is associated with positives. So on this slide, if the green and the red are vice versa, so if the -50 has a green bar and the +50 has a red bar, then maybe it could have attracted attention. And you're right, Hussein, color blindness we have to keep into consideration anyone who's colorblind. They would see the same color on both. Okay. Another thing that I see a lot on data charts is everything has a color. Now, if everything has a color, you're basically not attracting attention to anything. And if everything has color, we're not really using the power of colors to our favor. Sometimes they look better, of course, with colors, but they don't send the right message with a lot of colors. Two of the most, let's say, the most used mistakes on data charts are the excessive use of colors and the excessive use of pie charts. And then I would add a third, when we use really too much ink. So let's say we use grid lines, like the first example we saw. We use unnecessary unnecessary details on the charts. So whenever you do a chart, think of it again and then see what is not necessary, just remove it. And over here, the most unnecessary thing that we do see is everything has a color. And then when everything has a color, nothing really stands out. So for this example, this is an annual customer survey. Those are the results of the annual customer survey. When we have all colors, it doesn't really attract us to any of the categories. When nothing has colors, again, we don't get attracted to any of the categories. When we use color, we can see the power of it. Because we're looking at the percentage favorable category on the results overview, the highest two favorable categories were colored in blue, and then blue is always it's not necessarily a good thing, but in this case, it's a good thing. When we added let's say, a summary or a brief of what are those two bars, we mentioned that we celebrate that we're doing well, and survey respondents are highly satisfied with price and convenience. And then when we look at the other side of things, the least favorable categories were relationship and brands. For this example, we see that we need to better understand why relationship and brands have got low scores. And then these are the areas that we need to focus on. So when we used blue and red in this, we attracted the attention of our audience into those two key areas that we need to focus on, let's say, as a company or as an audience, as a startup, whatever it is. Okay, so the key takeaways, we have 10 more minutes, so please feel free to ask anything on the Q&A. The key takeaways is that it's not about the data visual, but it's about the story. It's very easy to get lost in details of data visuals, but it's let's say suggested to zoom out and then think of the story that we're trying to tell, and then start with data visuals. Again, always put yourself in the shoe of your audience. If, for example, if I'm presenting to a senior management, I would want to attract their attention because they have limited time. I would want to attract their attention to the areas that we need action on, rather than just putting a lot of details. Decluttering is your best friend. Always, always, always declutter. So when you have a presentation, a data presentation, or even when you're working with data visuals in general, after doing the data visual, go back and declutter. There is always a thing or two to declutter from. Data visualization is used to make data more understandable and not to be creative. Now, this somewhat gets confusing sometimes because, again, I see a lot of cases where pie charts are used because they look nice. But it's not about being creative. At the end of the day, it's about sending the right message to your audience. So the key thing is to make data understandable and not creative. Use pre-attentive processing to your good. If you need to take a picture of this, please feel free. Pre-attentive processing helps a lot with your data visuals. It helps your audience understand your pain points and understand the actions that are expected out of them. And then I would say pie charts are confusing, use them carefully. And the last thing is avoid using the default headings of the data charts, which is, for example, issues resolved versus issues received over time. That's a boring data heading, while we can actually ask for the specific answer or the specific action that we need from our audience. And yeah, that's all I have for today.
We can take in a few questions and answers on the bottom. I can see like a few questions coming in. Just tap on the Q&A button so you can ask your questions.
Okay, so we have Ruwaida asking, is there a specific way to put our data, or do we need to check it each time on a pie chart or a bar chart or more? I think, Ruwaida, I somewhat answered it with the 5 questions. Maybe I can go back to them if you need to take a picture. So the 5 questions do help in choosing the correct data visual. Here you go. Okay. Yeah. What methods and tests do you use for comparing data and for statistics purposes? It's a good question. So it depends on how far do you want to compare data. If you're doing scientific research part of thing, then you can compare data with p-values, t-tests. There are many statistics tests that are used. But if you're looking more on the visual side, I would say the pre-attentive part would help. So always try to start with the first parts of this perceptions and visual thing, and then avoid using the lower ones, except if you have already consumed the topper ones on the same chart. And by the way, it's totally okay to have the same type of chart used multiple times on the same dashboard or on the same presentation. It's totally fine. Okay. Hassan, as a data scientist in Bahrain, what is the most commonly used language in the job market, R or Python? I would say Python. Honestly, it depends. Data science in general as a field, it's very flexible, and I would say it doesn't depend on the language used at all. But Python is usually easier to use because there are more people knowing Python than R. I personally have a personal preference of R, but then data science is not based on the language that is used, but it's more on the concept and the think process that you use for doing this. So yeah, I hope I answered the question. It depends on, mainly it depends on you. But then again, Python, so both R and Python have got a lot of packages for data visuals specifically. Python is used with a wider set of people, not necessarily in data science, but even in development. And this gives it an advantage, I think, that more people would be able to understand your code and then move it to deployment and production. Yeah. Creation of personas of your targeted audience. Do these need to be documented, or are these for informative purposes and informative? Hussein, if I understand your question correctly, it's about creating personas. So in general, personas are built on different aspects of things. You can have personas based on age, on gender, on the customer behavior, on different things. But in general, it's supposed to be flexible. Wala has a question: what data visualization software would you recommend for a beginner? It's a good question. I would honestly, Excel does the whole thing in a very easy and user-friendly way. Power BI is quite powerful. And if you work in a corporate setup, most probably you have the Power BI license. If you're a student, you would also probably have the Power BI license because it's a Microsoft product. So Power BI is very, very powerful. Tableau is also really powerful. I think that a lot of things can be done on the visualization software like Tableau and Power BI. But then if we come back to the basics, everything can be done on Excel. Okay, Suad, based on what you select, based on what do you select your main key variables to base your statistics on? Okay, it's a good question, Saad. I think it depends. If we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, it depends on the audience. So if your audience would understand your metric or your KPI, then it's the perfect thing to choose. Otherwise, if you would think that your audience would have a doubt in understanding the metric, I would suggest adding a definition of the metric on the side of the slide, which works perfectly just to make sure that everyone is on the same page. Iman Al-Samak. So Iman says that she usually works with infographics. Is Python a good choice, or is there a better program? Python is really powerful, especially because it's open source. There are a lot of good packages that would help you with this. So yeah, Python is a good choice, definitely. Okay. So someone asked, as a person getting into data science, what are the best resources that you'd recommend, and what are the best actions to take it? Okay, so it's a bit on the side of this topic that we discussed, but in general, the web has got everything. Start with a basic course and then build yourself up into it. And I would say programming is a key skill that you have to attain. It helps you a lot.
So there's one question if the presentation is being recorded. So it's being recorded. We're going to be uploading it to our YouTube channel. So you can just head over to Ela Bank's YouTube channel and you'll watch it there once it's up.
Great. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed the session.
Thank you all for attending. There's going to be a very quick survey in the end. That's just going to ask you guys for your opinions on what you want to see more of in the future. So this one focuses about data, visualization, presenting skills, you can say even. So there's a bunch of other topics that we're interested to see which ones you guys want to see more of. So just go ahead and fill in the survey. It's also going to be sent to you over an email. So thank you all for attending, and inshallah we'll see you next time also in other sessions.